Welcome to the Casting Forward podcast, brought to you by Clubmate, the all-in-one management platform for clubs and fisheries. We'll be talking all things fish and fishing with new guests every episode from the world of angling, including fishery managers to some of the best anglers in the country, finding out what they're up to, advice for your fishery, and thoughts on the future of the sport.
Hi guys, and welcome to the latest episode of the Casting Forward podcast with Clubmate. We've got an absolutely fantastic guest today. We're joined by Mr. Steve Ringer of Steve Ringer Fishing and Tackle Guru fame. I'm sure everyone's heard of him. Possibly one of the most famous anglers on earth, and certainly one of the best, and for very good reason. Welcome, Steve. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming.
No, cheers. Thank you. Thanks for the invite, and obviously looking forward to it.
Yeah, brilliant. Obviously, we've known each other for many years, so it's not like we're strangers to each other. So it's going to be nice to have a conversation about what's going on, catch up, and talk about fishing. Hopefully. Yeah,
normally it's about ferry meadows, so.
Yes, usually endless conversations about ferry meadows, which I'm sure we can probably touch on today as well. But let's talk about you first. We're not going to talk of the life of Steve Ringer because, as we spoke about a few minutes ago, it's been done a few times. You know, everyone wants a podcast of where you were born and what you did and how you became an angler. The Casting Forward podcast is all about kind of the angling and the future of the sport. It's all about talking about what's going on now, what are the challenges, what are the good things, and we like to really, focus on the good things, and then what the ideas for the future are, and also talk about not only the future of angling, but your future and how those two tie together. So talking about currently, I think the one thing people probably say or certainly think about Steve Ringer is like, what more can one man achieve? Because every year seems to be the year that you achieve even more, and it just seems to carry on and carry on. Now, I don't want you to get all shy and go red about it, but obviously, as an indicator, last year you were voted as the Match Angler of the Year in the Angling Times Awards. It was last year, wasn't it? I believe.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Which another fantastic achievement and a real testament to like how successful you've been. And you think about everything you've won. And you think, what can you possibly do to keep topping that? But obviously this year's turned into quite a year for you as well, obviously, Steve. So two really obvious ones, obviously, and I'll let you kind of come in on this and tell us a little bit about it. But you finally added the Feeder Masters crown, which is, I know, obviously from a personal perspective, how much that meant to you. And obviously just coming off the back of the European Champs. So tell us a little bit about 2025, Steve.
Yeah, 2025 has been a weird one because I didn't start particularly well. Never felt in great form. And it's weird. You talk about form. I think I'm very honest with myself, very analytical. I beat myself up a lot, but I think that's the only way to improve. And I think you have to acknowledge your own faults to improve. Nobody's perfect. We never have even when you win, I think you have to say sometimes maybe got my timing slightly wrong. Could I have done this a little bit better? And that's how you learn. So I didn't have a great start to the year, felt a bit stale, had some okay results.
But sometimes you win on the worst day, Steve. I mean, you'll have done it. You've been doing this a very long time. Sometimes when you win, you have to be honest with yourself and say that was lucky.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's the age-old saying it's better to be lucky than good. And in angling, you do need luck. You might need the right peg, or you might need that one. It's not a fluke fish, because a lot of the time you'll be fishing for it, but that one fish that tips the balance.
Yeah.
But no, I had a slow start, I set myself targets every year. Feeder Masters was the big one for me. I've always wanted to win it. I don't know how many years it's been going. I've been second twice. Darren Cox beat me at Bow Beach by about £7-8. But again, going back to what I said, sounds a massive margin on a natural water where it's roach and skimmers. But that's over 2 days, and I still believe now perfection would win you that. I could have won with perfection, but you don't get perfection.
Who's ever had that, Steve? Which one of us fishing has ever had the perfect day where you could say
no? That's what I always say. 10 out of 10 doesn't exist. 9.5 is about as close as you can get. So I didn't really see Feeder Masters coming. I lost to Zach Williams a couple of years ago by 10 ounces. Definitely had a chance then. Massive chance.
I remember that one, and I remember watching the results and feeling for you, because obviously I know you really well. I know how much that meant, and I remember watching it when Zach won.
There's always that feeling that you're not going to get over the line. It was a strange year this year because I turned up to Tamar don't know. I never really turned up thinking I was going to win. But after the 2 days practice with Adam, myself and Adam Wakeling practiced together, and we were more disciplined this year. In the past, we've gone for the easy life and just sat down in practice, caught as many skimmers as we can because skimmers are more fun than anything else. This year, we designated a skimmer day where we fished properly for skimmers, trying different things, and then a roach day where we literally just fished for roach, which when you're pleasure fishing and just winding in small roach, it's not particularly exciting. But it's important that when it comes to match day, particularly in a weight competition like Feeder Masters is, that you're on it from the start. And for the first time ever, probably since Feeder Masters was at Tamar, which is 5-6 years ago, come match day one, I actually felt really in tune with the venue. Like, I'm not saying I thought I was going to win, but I actually had a plan. And it's a great example of, in the past, there's a lot of pellet feeder fishing at Tamar for skimmers. And I've been sucked into fishing pellet feeder. I don't like fishing it. I don't really understand why it works. And I've never been able to get it to work properly. So this year, before I even went to Tamar, I took pellet feeders. But I thought to myself, I'm going to fish my way. And I'm a massive believer in you can take a method on board, but you can tweak it to suit how you want to fish. So I decided I was going to go back to fishing window feeder, still fish meal-based ground bait, pellets, but fish conventional and fish in a manner that I was comfortable in. And I think that helped massively in the final. And, don't know, sometimes you catch, don't know what you call it, like a ray of light almost, where everything clicks for you. And over the 2 days, I just felt like I was really in tune, fishing well. You know, when there's a lot of roach fishing, a lot of speed. I'm not a massive fan of trying to, people were catching 500 fish in 5 hours. I'm not a massive fan of that. I'm getting older. We're all getting older.
Yeah, it's a stamina game. That kind of speed fishing. Tamar's a venue that lends itself to stamina, and it's fast-paced fishing. You've got to be on it. And as you say, Steve, without being ageist, as you get older, you just get a bit slower, don't you? Like
you get slower.
You lose that 1% kind of thing.
So what I sort of came up with a way where, I'm not going to say what it is because I might need it again, but I came up with a method that I felt I could catch less numbers, but equally beat or even at least stay up with like the rest. I remember on day 2 of the Feeder Masters final, Joe Karas, I always pronounce his name wrong. He came and sat behind me and he said, how many fish? And it was about, hour and 20 minutes in. And I said 42. And he said, Rob Wotton's got 109. And I was like, Jesus Christ, I'm like 60 fish behind already, 60 plus. That's an hour's worth of fishing. And he sat with me for about 10 minutes. And what he said was actually important, but he didn't realise it at the time. He said, I'm going to get off now. He said, all I'll say is, he said, your stamp is ridiculous, he said, compared to everyone else's. And it's just like you think, actually, I'm not going to need the numbers. And like little things like that can make a huge difference.
Obviously, there's always a difference, and it's often been said about Tamar, and I don't want to kind of go into it too deeply. It's often been said that it lends itself to the professional anglers. It's a venue where you have to work it out and put a lot of effort in, and like if you figure, as you've said here, like if you figure it out, it becomes a lot easier. But when it comes to ignoring the venue, but when it comes to stamp of fish, it's something people take for granted. Like the old saying is, you can't help what's on the end of it. You can speed fish, you can catch a lot of fish, but you can't help how big they are. But that's only true to a certain extent. Yes, it's true sometimes, but you can work out how to catch a bigger stamp.
Yes, that's what I mean. You have to sort of think outside the box and think if you can't catch the numbers. And the one thing about Tamar in September is, there aren't skimmers. There aren't large heads of skimmers in every single peg. It's very depth specific. So you can't go to Tamar. I'll be on. Well, you could if you drew it exceptionally both days. Bear in mind it's over 2 days switching banks. If you drew exceptionally, probably like maybe 8 to 10 pegs on one day, and there's more on the second day. You can't go there and think I'm skimmer fishing both days. If you do,
no.
You will come unstuck. So then
you're probably 50-50 then, whether you're coming anywhere, aren't you? It's pure luck, or it brings luck back into it a lot, kind of thing.
Yeah. So then you have to come into the context of, right, there's a lot of small fish. Do I like small fish fishing? And I believe if you're going to play the numbers game, you have to love it, because otherwise, after a couple of hours, it bogs you down. You start to get, It's just if you're not enjoying it, then you won't do it as well. Some people thrive on it, like Adam Wakelin absolutely loves it. Michael Buttwalder loves it. And it's no coincidence they're two of the best at it.
Yeah, I mean, there are people that small fish fishing is what they do and they thrive on the numbers. One that I remember, and I'm sure you probably know the guy, but Stu Redman. Old Stu Redman, he was like the silverfish master. Like in terms of numbers, he was nearly unbeatable, certainly locally here, unbeatable on a silverfish venue. But they thrive on it. And like you say, it's hard to replicate that if you don't. But in your case, there's a kind of professional drive. Obviously, your job is to figure out how to win.
Yeah,
and you do it. You do it for business, essentially. I've got to win this for business. But some people, it's hard to make yourself a small fish angler. But this year's really shown. And a lot of people could say, well done. You're always going to win Feeder Masters eventually, or it's your year. You got lucky, but you essentially have figured out how to win Feeder Masters. You've worked really hard at it. And just like jumping back 10 minutes to when you spoke at the start about, you said basically that, you think about things a lot, you plan a lot and you prep a lot, and that's what people need to do. It depends what kind of person you are, aren't it? There are people that are very laid back and that will always work for them.
Yeah,
but there are categories of people.
It depends if you want to win. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I've always been a winner. I'm a terrible loser, I'll be honest. You know what I mean? I don't handle losing amazingly well.
I've seen it a few times.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? And loads of times afterwards, I thought, didn't really need to react quite as badly as that. But I only react like that because I want to win. My honest opinion is, if you want to be a winner, if losing don't hurt, you ain't winning. You know what I mean? Like, don't get me wrong. Some days you cannot win. It's just impossible. And a good frame in place then is the best you can achieve. But you have to set out to win. You know what I mean? I drove home twice.
Ferry Meadows, mate. You look at Ferry Meadows. There's no better example. There are days, than this because you know the venue so well. You're not winning. At the draw.
But one of the reasons venues like Ferry, which is a brilliant example, is so popular is on its day, and I mean this is no disrespect to anyone. Anyone can win at Ferry Meadows. Anyone, and that's the type of venue now that I believe is keeping match fishing going, because it's
exciting. It's risky. It's exciting. And not only can anyone win, Steve, anyone can beat you.
Yes, it's not just someone. I've had some serious batterings in the last 2 years there.
I don't remind David Moisey, because I think he's going to dine on it forever, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean that with all respect. Not only can anyone win, but they can beat the best angler in the world. And there aren't on Tamar. That's very unlikely.
Tamar's got an obvious, not a problem. That's the wrong word. When you look at top three this year, obviously myself first, Des Ship second, Andy Power third. That's that. In a way, that means it's possibly the best venue for a final, because, again, no disrespect to anyone, the best anglers win every year. Yeah. So, like, to me, that's what the sport should be about. As in, if you go to a final, you shouldn't be putting your hand in the bag, trying to draw one peg or two pegs or three pegs to win a major title. You know what I mean?
I think you've got to consider Feeder Masters to probably be the feeder champs of the UK. It is the pinnacle feeder competition in the UK, probably. And if that's the case, it should be about who's the best angler and not who drew the lucky peg. Yes,
but also what's becoming really apparent, and I've not noticed it maybe over the last 3 years, you need some. I don't know. Is that well? I'll say it. You need something for your average guy to a spot. Like take my dad for instance. My dad's a great example. Obviously, things aren't as easy for him anymore, as in he can't. But like he looks at Feeder Masters and he says, I'll go to Ferry Meadows on the qualifiers because I love Ferry Meadows. If I qualify, Tamar's very difficult for me because he's not, obviously he's in his 70s. He's not as fast as he was. And he's like, I can't sling a method down the middle and have the chance of 10 big bream to win. And I think that's what is it's needed. But from my own selfish point of view, I think if you work really hard to get to a final, it should reward the best anglers. But I also appreciate, and I can understand now, that if the best anglers win all the time, then people aren't going to go, and that's
Yeah,
why
you wouldn't want it for the whole. You wouldn't want it for the whole of Feeder Masters, would you? The Bream Bingo, as we call it, the Bream Bingo of Ferry Meadows, is what makes Feeder Masters appealing to a wider audience.
Yeah,
That
obviously
chance of
venues
winning
like Ferry sells out. Obviously, might even be the quickest one. I'm not
minutes.
sure.
I think it's still the fastest one.
Yeah, it's either Ferry or Barston that go first.
Ferry or Barston, yeah.
But you need something where Joe Bloggs, if you want to call him that, can sit down, can draw his peg and go, I've drawn the fence end at Ferry, obviously an amazing area. I can win from there. You know what I mean? And it does. And if every peg was the same at Ferry, instead of like selling out in seconds, the matches would struggle to sell out. Because you
think you've got no more chance here, and I'm going to get beaten by Steve Ringer.
Yeah, because you need that jeopardy of all the best anglers that are there can draw badly, and I draw the best peg.
Yeah.
Whereas you go on a commercial, and in summer on a commercial, maybe, obviously the draw's taken out of it a little bit, which makes it more difficult. I feel like we're at a massive crossroads with match fishing, as in, obviously, money's tighter. People are getting a bit fed up, like with maybe being pools fodder, if that makes sense. On certain,
the journeyman that turns up every week, gives you his 30 quid, never wins a section, just putting money into the pools and no chance of winning kind of thing.
Yes,
I don't know whether I agree or disagree. I mean, obviously we're all aware of the state of the economy. We're all aware of the pressures and the budget, things like that. We're all aware there's less money. But certainly from my perspective in the last few years, it makes people want to enjoy themselves a bit more. So people have thrown a little bit of money at it. Like again with our matches, we put the prize money up to make it more exciting. And I think to an extent people don't mind that. There's a massive audience for that because it's only once or twice a year. Not on your level obviously, but obviously there are some people with Feeder Masters, for example, as you well know, that buy every round. When their tickets go on sale, they'll buy 28 tickets if they can get them, and they'll certainly try and get those tickets over the time. And it's all about the campaign. Now that's a lot of money.
Yes.
But there are people on a local basis that buy 2 or 3 every year, and no matter how much it costs, it's at least on Sunday they don't have to worry about how broke they are Monday to Friday.
Yeah.
So I think there is still an audience there, and it is a bit 50-50 really.
What I've noticed is though, like if you go back to Feeder Masters, there's two camps now. There's the people that have like looked at Tamar and gone, I'm not great at small fish fishing, but I love Feeder Masters, so I'm going to make it my business to get better. And then there's another camp who are like, not really feeling Tamar, it doesn't suit me, so I'm not going to do Feeder Masters.
Yeah,
which is a shame, but obviously that's the beauty of life.
There's a few out there that still go in. Yeah, there's a few in there that still go into it and say, even if I qualify, I'm not going to Tamar. I'll fish my rounds because I like them, because it's a great event. You get to see all your mates every year. Obviously, we all see the same people every year. But if I qualify, I'm not going to Tamar because it's just not my venue. It's a long way away and it's hard to fish. Anyway, conscious that we've got a lot to chat about today, we'll try and move on from that side of things. But just sum up before we move on to kind of the European champs, which is probably the other big thing for you this year. How did it actually feel to finally stand on the top of the Feeder Masters podium?
It's surreal, to be fair. And like at the time, I don't think it sank in because on day two, obviously I had a decent day one, but I was £4 behind, which sounds daft, but £4 when you're fishing for small fish is a lot over 5 hours. So I went to bed Saturday night. I wasn't really thinking I'm going to win tomorrow. And then when I drew, I thought I'd drawn really badly on day two, but they'd actually changed the pegging, so I actually drew all right. But all the way through the match, there was no bank walkers like around our area, so you just sort of assume you're not in the race.
You're a bit undecided on it, kind of thing.
Yeah, and obviously come the way in, all I was thinking was, I'm a big believer in fate sometimes, and luck goes your way. With 5 minutes to go on day two, a cormorant appeared in my peg, which is obviously a different subject and not ideal, on my skimmer line, and I thought, I'm just not going to catch another skimmer. It's a weight match. Just put 4 or 5 small roach in the net, and you never know, a few ounces might be worth a few £100. So I dropped back in on my roach line, caught 4 roach for probably 5 ounces, and then obviously scales come along, and it's like everyone's weighing in. Put my fish on the scales, and I beat Des by 2 ounces. But obviously at the time, not in my head, it's not to win. It's maybe for a top 3, a top 5, a top 6. And then all of a sudden, everyone's weights start coming in, and you've won. But it wasn't even until it's quite a long. Everyone was like, "You've won," And like I wouldn't, because it meant so much, and I've been second twice. I wouldn't have it until Lee Kerry came over just before presentation, shook my hand, and said no one deserves it more. And then obviously I believed it. But when obviously the dust settled, you look back and think that 5 minutes could have easily just sat for a skimmer, not caught it, lost by 4 ounces or whatever, and be sat here now sobbing into the microphone.
Yeah, and that is the absolute difference, Steve. You know as well as anyone, with the amount of matches you fish, there are anglers and there are anglers. There's the 1%, and the 1% are always busy, and they're always changing something, and they're always looking for how to win or section, whatever win means that day. When it rains, your average angler sits back under his brolly and hunches up, whereas the 1% have to win, so that whether they're wet or dry or cold or yeah. I mean, we spoke about this before, but I'll never forget the video you did on. I think it was at Makin's years ago, and it was like a live match at Makin's Fishery, I think. And it was pissing down with rain, and there you were, like 100%, no change whatsoever, and everyone else is just huddled under the brolly, and it just shows the difference. If you want to win, and we've already spoke about this a few minutes ago, it takes effort. It takes effort and sacrifice.
I think you have to set yourself targets. And going back to Feeder Masters, that was my last year. I won the UK Champs, a competition that I came back to obviously because it's on commercials. Came back to and won. And then all I had left on my bucket list, if you want to call it, was Feeder Masters. And I don't know. Obviously, a lot of people since have said to me, "What's next?"
What's next?
I don't know. Is the honest answer. I did sit down, a bit vain, maybe some people will say the other night, and I wrote a list of everything I've won. But I haven't really come up with anything.
It's only vain if you start walking around with it, Steve, on a great big placard.
It surprises you when you start going through it. Things. Bear in mind, I'm not listing every single open match win or etc.
No, but the headline titles kind of thing.
Yeah, what I call big titles, and you think, Jesus Christ, what I've won is very diverse. If someone said to me, "You've got to choose something," obviously next year, the Freestyle World Championships, which my brother's heavily involved in, I'd like to get them a medal in Hungary. That's, That's. I think if I had to pick one more thing, I haven't done golden. I can never get this right. Golden Reel or Maver Match this, but I've got no buzz for them. You have to have if you're going to set targets and you want to win things, there has to be a buzz, and I haven't got that buzz for those two events.
So before we move on to the European Champs, which is obviously not that long ago since now, but before we move on to that, you've raised a good topic, and I know you've spoken about this before, and I remember you speaking with Matt about it on the kind of Tackle Guru podcast. Do you truly believe that a good angler is a good angler? And I know you said you haven't got the buzz, but if you got the buzz, do you think you could just you could go win the match this? I don't mean just go win it, but if you could just apply yourself to it for a year or two. Do you think a good angler is a good angler?
Yeah, my honest opinion is, and obviously there's this proper fishing debate and all that side of things, a good angler can do anything. It might take him a little while, but there's nothing, I believe I could win anything, last year I came back to the UK Champs, which is all on commercials. I'd not been seen on the commercial scene for, 10 years. And everybody was like, oh, no chance. But you don't forget. And I believe that the 1%, if you want to, might even be less than that, have got something that you can't teach. And you make it's like
an intuition there,
Yes, I used to do. I don't really do any anymore. I used to do a bit of coaching, and occasionally you see someone who's got it, but you can't teach that. It's like sometimes someone will watch me and go, "Why did you do that?" And I don't really know. Well, all I can say is it came into my head and I thought it, so I did it. But you can't teach the decision making, and that I call it like a sixth sense, and not everyone's got it.
It's made of many things, Steve. That sixth sense is some of it. I think you're born with. Some of it is experience because subliminally you're not actively thinking about this example from the vaults or whatever. But obviously you just build up this intuition over time of subconsciously without actively thinking about it. Your brain's saying to you, "I feel like I've done this before. I know what I think I need to do here." But when you package all that together, that makes the 1%. That makes knowing what to do at the right time. And I think one of the best examples I actually saw of that was Phil. I actually sat with Phil for through when he won that on Ferry, the series on Ferry, the Ferry Masters, or it was, and just watching him fish that final day, he was on the high bank, and just those micro changes, a slightly smaller feeder, or going from a window to a cage again, and just like changing the amount of bait, or even dampening your ground bait up again, you're making it a bit sloppier again.
But that's what it is. You hit the nail on the head there. People watch and they look for what I call miracles and shortcuts. There's no miracles. There's no shortcuts. No. It's a series of tiny events, tiny changes over 5 hours that are the difference between maybe first and nowhere. But you can't teach that. You can't teach someone those changes because every scenario is different. Like you say, part of it
always active with your hands, is it? It's active here more than
it's active there. And someone many years ago once said to me, and it's an amazing bit of advice: if you think it, do it, and do it then. Yeah. Don't wait, because loads of times you think something and like, I don't know, I'll give it another hour.
I'll back this one up, and obviously I do a lot more specimen fishing than match fishing these days. But if it's in your head, just do it, because once it's in your head, you've decided, and you're just getting upset. You'll sit there and you'll think, why didn't I do it? Why didn't I do it? Why didn't I do it? Why didn't I do it?
There's nothing worse in a match situation than thinking something for an hour, not doing it, and then trying it with an hour to go and finding out it was amazing and you've done it too late.
Yeah.
And like you said, happens.
And like you said, it is those micro changes. And this is also, again, highlights the difference between, the pack and the 1%. You can sit side by side. And if they're open to learning, they'll probably, they'll improve. But people think they're doing the same thing and they ain't. It looks the same. You can fish on Ferry and you can look exactly the same. You can go to Barston or Ferry or Tamar. You can look like you're two people doing the same thing. But you will be doing a lot, you'll be doing the thinking and the changing. And they'll look at you and think, well, I'm feeder fishing as well. Why aren't I catching, the same amount? But there's that little difference.
I think the other big point is, and I think Matt Godfrey always says to me that my biggest thing is, I'm never very, obviously people say I'm miserable, but I'm never very happy. As in, like, he said,
never satisfied.
A lot of people win and they're like, oh, brilliant, won, and they don't think nothing of it. He says, you win, you go home, sit in your chair and think, oh, you could have won by more.
Yeah.
That's
obviously,
I mean, like that.
Probably the better way for people to accept that is you learn more on a bad day than a good day. Because if you win,
every day's a learning day, and like, but I do believe if you want to be the best, and don't get me wrong, not everyone wants to be the best. Some people want to enjoy it. Yeah. You have to set the bar high. You have to be very, very self-critical, and you have to beat yourself up a lot. And you have to be a bad loser.
You have to be ruthless, Steve. Going home and thinking, I won Feeder Masters, but it was like 2 ounces. How can I annihilate him next year? You want to go home and not just, have a bit of champagne. You want to think, how could I have won that harder? How could I have won that better?
I still look back now and think first day I cost myself £2 at the start with a bad start. But obviously I wouldn't make that mistake again.
So talking about that topic of kind of, is a good angler just a good angler? Now, this before we move on to the Europeans, the conversation I'm really interested in, and this is what you were talking on the Tackle Guru podcast about a while ago, is the international scene and how the UK kind of struggles for that pathway into the international scene. Now that fascinates me because I think obviously, as you've said, there are a lot of anglers in the UK that could apply themselves to that team. It's becoming harder and harder to get into it, which is a known topic because the people in it are so good at it because they keep doing it, and it's kind of self-fulfilling. Each year you're 10% better at international than the audience. But there are anglers in the UK, and we're talking about the people on the on the match this scene and things like that. You know the names. People like Andy Power. People like that. Do you think there is anything we can do differently to make a pathway into international fishing? Because at the moment, there just doesn't seem to be the incentive. You can go you can go win 50 grand domestically, or you can go internationally where there isn't much of an audience. Where, if we're honest, and I think this year's coverage was great. But the coverage by Dren and things like that was fantastic. Best I've seen it. But most years, it's kind of like what world champs? Are they? Are they fishing? And hopefully that's a step in the right direction for the future. But what do you think of the international scene at the moment, and certainly the makeup of the team? Because you guys aren't going to be around forever.
No, for me, the international scene it's the pinnacle. If you want to be the best, you can be the best in the UK by maybe winning Fisho or UK champs or match this, whatever. But if you want to be the best of the best, then you need to be world champion. That's as simple as that.
As with any sport, you can't beat the best in the world, can you? And obviously, you'll know this from the double gold, which was obviously a pinnacle moment for you.
What I'll say is, other countries are different to the UK, and that's just stating the obvious. But maybe the adoration is the right word you get when you go abroad. It's completely different to the UK. So, like, you can say obviously it gets ignored a bit in the UK, but like when you're abroad, when you turn up to your peg, depends which country you're in, and there's like 70, 80 people waiting for you to get to your peg to watch. You know what I mean? That shows you how big it is in other countries, and like in other countries, they regard world champions as gods. You know what I mean? Like,
and this, I spoke with Godfrey about this, like, and he had the same kind of opinion as you. And I will back up what you both say. Everyone that's in it, if you speak to people like yourself and Matt, will say it's the most important thing in the world. If I had to pick one thing, if it's winning Fisho or winning the world champs, it's the gold at the world champs. And obviously that's the same in other sports. There's other sports where the financial driver isn't in fishing for your country, playing a sport for your country, but the pinnacle of being the best in the world and being a winner for your country is probably. I've not met one that's in the team yet that hasn't said that would be their choice. But do you think there's a problem with that? Do you think that's indicative of an issue?
Depends how much you want it. Obviously, people choose a path. And it's not a coincidence that everyone who's within the England setups pretty much isn't chasing Fisho, isn't chasing match this, isn't doing that. It's very, very difficult to do both. And don't get me wrong, I understand totally. Like, so let's take Jamie Hughes, obviously one of them, probably the best known commercial type angler. I've got no doubt if Jamie wanted to diversify, he could, go and fish for England. But there's not. Unless that comes from him, as in he decides to say, right, I've won everything in the UK, as in like Fisho, God knows how many times.
You couldn't do. It'd be very hard to do both, wouldn't it? To do them at the same time.
You couldn't do both. To me, you have to. There's two ways of doing this. You either have to have an individual who goes, let's take the England feeder team. I want to fish in the England feeder team. So he says, right. He speaks to Dean. Obviously, Barlow's the manager. Says, what can I do? Dean will probably say, need to make some trips into Europe, fish the right events, etc., and knock on the door. To me, you can't sit at home fishing commercial venues week in, week out, and expect to get an England call up. No. That's the way it's set up at the minute. Is I honestly believe if you want it and chase it and push it hard enough, like now we have, like with the feeder team, we've got like Gaz Lambert. Obviously, he's starting to do the right things now, coming aboard. Max Stevens, Tom Noten, they're knocking on the door. They've made a conscious effort and a lot of sacrifice. It's a lot of sacrifice of time and money.
Yeah,
they've decided that's what they want to do. They want to fish for their country. In an ideal world, if you wanted to make it more inclusive, we'd do what other countries do. We'd have some sort of qualifying system. Like I think in Hungary, I'll get the numbers slightly wrong, but their team is picked basically over 10 matches. So they have like 10 qualifying events. It might be like 8 to count. I'm not sure. Or it might be 10 to count. And then at the end of it, the top 10 qualify for the international team. And then I think it can be like the top 3 are automatic, as in they have to fish 1, 2, and 3. And then the next out of the 7 that's left, the manager can pick another 3. But it has to be in the top 10. So if you miss the top 10, you're out. But over the course of 10 matches, so a team like Hungary, they pretty much feel the same team because they're the best anglers. But that would massively help.
When I say there's a problem, it's not a problem with you guys choosing to do that. It's kind of more. I mean, is it a problem for the future? Because it doesn't feel like we've got. And I know the people you've spoken about obviously have really come onto the scene. Really fought their way in. But it's quite a manual process. And like as Godfrey said, when I asked Godfrey kind of a similar question, he said, look, what you probably have to do is, like you said, ring Dean ask what I need to do, and in all honesty, probably sacrifice yourself for a year or two
At least
and go
maybe
to Europe.
maybe 3
Yeah,
years.
if not more. But that's
But
quite
the only
manual.
other way is to adopt that like Germany have a similar qualifying system. I think France do.
Yeah.
But obviously, you need someone. You know what I mean? You need probably the Angling Trust competition side of it. They'd have to step up and say, "We're going to run a."
You'd have to run a series of FIPS rules qualifiers, wouldn't you?
Because
You'd
it has to
have
be
have
FIPS rules. There's no point saying we're going to do 10 qualifying matches. The first one's at Bath.
Go win Feeder Masters.
Tunnel Barn. It'd need a proper It needs a proper qualifying system. That's a lot of manpower, a lot of effort. Yeah. Should it be done? Possibly.
Yeah, depends if we want to be really serious about and again, the Angling Trust is probably who should do this. Angling Trust competitions. Do we want to be serious about a grassroots progression into international fishing? Because at the moment we've got an exceptional team, of people like yourself. But like you said, it's quite a manual structure to keep that going. And obviously people are going to drop off as the years go by. At the moment, it's manual. And I won't say it's down to luck, but you've got to manually pull them people in, or they've got to manually reach out. We don't have a structure. And it's a bit similar to the conversation with cricket, when they talk about Cricket Australia, we've got the Ashes coming up now. Cricket Australia have got this fantastic grassroots cricket system where they've got this endless funnel all the way from the 90s. Whereas in the UK, we've got this really disparate system of, we're struggling to get juniors through. And I think that's what we're probably lacking. Although at the moment it's not bad. But as you'll be well aware, and obviously I spoke to Matt about it as well, the rest of the world's caught up a little bit. It feels like
I'd say caught up. A great analogy, and as well, when we first started the World Feeder Championships, there was probably, if there was 25 teams fishing, 7 or 8 that could win maximum. Now, if there's 25 teams fishing, my honest belief is there's 20 teams that can win, which makes it much, much harder, and it's why you don't see a team anymore dominate for very long, because it's impossible. The standards much. You listen to Bob Nudd, obviously, and even Alan Scotthorne, obviously multiple individual world champions, team world champions. They'll say that it's completely different now to that era. The standard has gone ridiculously, and in Europe, particularly in that far eastern bloc, sort of like Hungary, Romania, that sort of area, they're embracing international fishing. They're living for it. They love it. And as a result, they're on this massively upward spiral. Whereas I feel like I wouldn't say we're declining. I'd just say we're flatlining. And we've been flatlining now.
It's kind of stagnant. I don't want to say that in the most negative of manners, but we're doing what we've always done.
This is obviously freestyle world champ. I went to the first time I fished freestyle this year in Portugal. And I don't know the average age of our team, but it's got to be, I'd say it's, mid-40s. I think Hungary and Ukraine were like mid-20s. That's a huge difference. Yeah. If someone said to me now, we haven't even got an under 25 feeder team, from what I understand, A, no one wanted, there wasn't a manager who applied, and B, we haven't got the numbers of anglers, which is...
in 20 years' time, Steve, if nothing changes, if we took today and landed us in 20 years' time, that would put the England team at over 60. And the rest of them at 40. So 20 years' time, if nothing changes, you are going to lose.
I don't want to be a massive doomer, but I believe in 20 years' time, I'm not even sure where match fishing in the UK will be. That's my honest.
No, I agree. But there's obviously 10 other things to consider in that. But
and I don't want to. That's not doom. I think that's reality. Like when I look, I'm 49 now. When I look how much it's changed since I started, I really struggle to see. In Europe, it's thriving. But I struggle to see in the UK. Don't know. I'm still 49, still quite young in match fishing in England.
Yeah, it's quite shocking, really, isn't it?
Other than the lads who've come through the pathway with obviously Matt, Frankie, and them, there isn't loads coming through. It's really difficult, I think, for juniors to bridge that gap between 16 and 25. I think a lot get lost in that period because obviously life changes massively. They get their independence, drinking comes, girls come, buying houses, and they obviously fishing's expensive and they get lost to it forever.
I mean, I want to talk about juniors because it's one of the key drivers for us as a kind of business. And we work in a lot of junior participation. I always like to get people's opinions on it, but just to kind of round this bit out. Now, obviously, earlier you said that one of the things that really has driven your success is that you're a winner. You know, you want to win. You're obsessed with winning. So when it comes to that international scene, I don't know whether this is a tough question or not for you. Are you happier now that it's more difficult, or were you happier when it was easier to win? You know, was it more important? You know,
because at the time you don't realise it's easier to win. You know what I mean? I remember when I first started thinking, Jesus Christ, how difficult is this? I remember Tommy Pickering saying to me when we first started the feeder team, I only fish for gold, blah, blah, blah. We're here to win. And I sat in the room thinking, I'd just like a medal. You know what I mean? Because to me, a world championship medal at that time was as good as a win. Now I understand more. There can still be great silvers because sometimes you can't win golds, but you always aim for gold. So I don't know. I think it's natural progression that teams have caught up. It was extra sweet this year because we hadn't won for so long. So when you haven't won for so long, there's that doubt. And I said it in my Facebook write-up at the time. You ask yourself a lot of questions like, am I still good enough? As in, personally, I don't mean the team. Am I still good enough to be doing this? And like it's natural that doubt starts to set in because you go from a period of looking around saying, we're the best team, everyone's watching us. And then at the end, you're clapping all the other teams up on the podium while sat there thinking, what's gone wrong again?
Do you feel a level of expectation? Is there always an expectation on the England team? You know, when you go to Europe, is there always this pressure? Like, do you feel like you're celebrities, so to speak?
I don't feel a pressure, but there's no doubt other countries look at us as like, it's not big-headed. They look at us as leaders to a degree.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they expect very high standards from England, but I think that goes back to like Bob Nudd's era, Alan Scotthorne, Tommy's. They set
the pillars of angling, nearly like
they
the pillars of match fishing.
They set the bar and they set it really high. So England's still living on that, like where the bar's set. You know what I mean? Like we were leaders. Yes, we've been caught up, but we've still got amazing anglers. And my honest belief is I still think we've got the best anglers in the world, but we don't have the type of fishing, maybe the fish species, the climate, and we don't do enough of it.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. I don't want anyone to think when we talk about this, we're saying the anglers are worse, or that it's a great thing that the rest of the world's catching up. And for the sport, that's brilliant. The more people in the world that are competing at that level, the longer this is going to continue. And I do still think, if you think of the names, Stephen, like not just yourself, but the name list of people we've got in the England setup, it's phenomenal anglers.
Yeah.
But obviously, I think you've hit the nail on the head. The problem is that we don't have the fishing. It's not the anglers. We don't have the fishing. And I think if we are going to continue it into the future, I think the one thing that needs to change isn't the anglers, it's the setup. We've got to have some kind of structure in the UK, some kind of, whether it is led by the Angling Trust or not. There's got to be this kind of grassroots and, that gap. And we'll cover this in Kids Fishing in a minute or two. But anyway, let's talk Europeans then. It's not long since you've come back from Europe as double golds. How did that come about? How did that feel? Like you said, it's great to feel like you're winners again. So to go through the European champs for us, did you feel like it was yours? Did you feel like you had a good chance?
The European Feeder Cup, we won it in the first year. It was at Barston in England. And then we came second last year. I won the individual last year, but we came second as a team. Germany blitzed the event. It was more bream fishing last year. And obviously following on from winning the Worlds, manager Dean Barlow said to me, we really need to do the double, and cement the dominance, etc. So we're going to go strong. So we went with exactly the same team that won. Matt Stevens came in for Tom Noten, but we went very, very strong team-wise. And I said to Dean, the best chance we've got of winning in Belgium, which is where it was, in Gestengen, is a roach match. And it turned into a roach match, which was right up our street. Personally, I drew in, it's quite an interesting one. I drew in this channel, and we talk about fish migrating or moving. It's a shallow channel for the lake. The lake we fished is like a sea. That's the size of it. It's like fishing in the sea, but you're in a lake. And I drew in this channel twice. And I won't dwell on the other day, but in this channel, It's about 120 metres wide and it's a bit shallower. But when I say shallower, it's 15 foot deep, so it's not shallow.
It's deep enough. It's not exactly 3 foot
and there's 12
on a bar, is it?
There's 12 people in this channel. On the left-hand end, obviously, is like peg 80, and it goes around a slight corner, but it's pretty straight. Then the last 3 pegs go around the corner. And every single day, there is no fish in the channel when the match starts. So the match starts, everyone chucks out, not a single person gets a bite until the guy on the left-hand end, which is peg 80, which is basically, it's like a bottleneck, and there's a wide bit to the right, wide bit to the left, but they always come from the left. Don't know why. Well, obviously, that's where they live. So you cannot imagine sitting somewhere like 4 pegs in, sat there thinking, I can't catch a fish until he catches one on the end, because he's your indicator. And both days I drew in there, I think the first day it was 45 minutes. I was 3 in on the first day. The end peg got one after 45 minutes. Then he's on 7, like 10 minutes later. This is roach fishing, good quality roach. And then the lad on my left, he gets like 5. And then I chuck in and I catch. And then within 5 minutes, they're like 6 pegs to my right as well. Like, I'd love to see underwater and see what a huge migration of fish
it's got to be a lot of fish there, Steve.
Yeah, incredible.
It's got to be a lot of fish.
They range from 2 ounces to 1.5 pounds. So, there was a 3 pound roach caught in practice, which is like, to us, it's a fish of a lifetime, but to them out there, not saying it's common, but it's not that unusual to catch one that big. I basically had 3 days roach fishing. I had some really good decision making. I felt like I got my decision making spot on, working with Dean a couple of times. There was one time on day 2 where we were like, we could gamble and fish for skimmers for individual, maybe, but it's a team match. So, like, if you gamble and fish for skimmers and I don't catch any, we get no points. So we played safe, and I just nicked a second, which was the right end of, got beat by someone with skimmers and big perch and stuff. But I just nicked all the other skimmer weights with roach. So, and it's dead interesting fishing, as in, you get 4 or 5 really quick, and then nothing for like 10 minutes. And like how you load your feeder was, even though it's deep, you had to like touch the bait into your feeder. And like we're using window feeders, the tiniest. I've never loaded a feed, not even at Ferry Meadows, so gently. And you think all the bait must be coming out, but all I can think is everything's off bottom. So you need basically bait falling through the water to drag them down. So to be fair, I had, the lads will probably tell you, I had 2 really good draws for a first and a second, and in the channel. Obviously, the daunting thing about that channel is when they're not there, waiting, knowing you cannot catch it. Imagine fishing a scenario where you're chucking in the lake and you can't get a bite until someone else catches one. That's
you know that when you get your bite, you're already behind. Without doubt, you're already behind.
On day 3, obviously on day 2, I didn't draw in this channel, and on day 2, it was 2 hours before the end of the channel caught, which is a long time. So on day 3, I chucked out at the start just in case there was a miracle fish out there. Nothing happened. So after 25 minutes, I picked up a little rod and fished in the rocks. There was some asp, like, 5 to the ounce. So I caught 10 of them. As I swung my 10th little asp in, they probably wouldn't have gone an ounce in total. I looked up and the lad on the end of the channel was swinging a roach. So I literally was like, put that down now, get back out, and within 2 chucks, you've got a roach. But no, amazing fishing. It's a massive lake. As a team, team fishing is a lot about confidence. We went there, obviously, really close-knit, getting on amazing. Confidence is high. And we did have good draws, but we fished well as well. It's like my brother Phil always says when someone's moaning about so-and-so's drawn his socks off again, fish don't swim into your keep net. He said, we're not just going to sit there and sink the keep net and they're all going to swim in. Yes, you need a good draw, but you still have to catch them. Yeah. And
you've still got to fish your match, haven't you? You've still got 6 hours to fish well.
But you don't get this on the continent. And this is an interesting point. In England now, there's this massive, at the end, it's not well done, it's well drawn.
And it's wrong, really. I know everyone pokes a bit of fun, but it becomes serious. Yeah, it starts to become a little bit depressing, doesn't it?
People say it's banter, but it isn't really. I don't think there's any need for it personally. When you go abroad,
many a person suffered from bullying, Steve. On a much more serious topic, many a person's been bullied, and people called it banter.
Yeah, Exactly. I just feel like we've got, to a degree, we seem to have got quite bitter as a nation at times. Whereas you go abroad, you could draw the best MPEG in the world, win, and everyone's like, amazing performance. Can't believe how many you've caught from there. Blah blah blah. Not one single person will mention the fact you've been on an MPEG. It's
it's something. There's definitely room for improvement in the UK scene as to how we celebrate it and how we appreciate it. I do think anglers. I choose my words carefully. I don't want to say maybe they're spoiled, but there is this bitterness and there is this kind of why not me? And there is a little bit of we've lost a little bit of the kind of camaraderie and the friendly feel to it a bit, Steve. I think, and that well drawn always kind of winds me up as well, kind of thing. Because it's not well drawn. It's well spent the last 40 years being good enough to do this, isn't it? Like it's 40 years of your life in that.
And I do think some people say it's a joke, but they don't realise how damaging it is to maybe someone who doesn't win very often.
Yeah. And if you haven't got the confidence, Steve.
A lot of people are like, I've just won maybe even won your first match, and instead, as you're going up to collect your money or your trophy, someone says, well drawn. Don't know. That don't leave a great impression on anyone.
I mean, something to think about. I'm sure we're not going to solve it today. But let's just sum it up then. We're getting towards the end of 2025. Now it's just about Christmas. Everything's in the shops, the songs are on and all that kind of thing. So given those two things, given Feeder Masters and Europe, you're going to call it a successful year? It's hard not to, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, because I've ticked off the last... Obviously, if someone would have offered me Feeder Masters at the start of the year and nothing else, I'd have ran off with it into the sunset. But to go from Feeder Masters to retaining my type, obviously team and individual at the European Feeder Cup, is the perfect end to the year. You know what I mean? That's, and it's not the end to the year, but all the big events are done now. I'll be spending
the flagship stuff.
Yeah, I'll be spending a bit of time at Hallcroft with the pairs. Got a couple of golden rod qualifiers for the feeder one, but I definitely ease off now until probably end of March.
Yeah, kind of springtime again. Of course, Ferry Feeder Cup's got to be on there.
Mid-March.
Yeah, I think our first match is booked in for the first weekend in April, literally 5th or something like that. But Ferry Feeder Cup's got to be one that you'd like on your hit list. I know it's not the massivest competition, but obviously, as you've often said, one of your favourite venue, or certainly one of your favourite venues, the Ferry Feeder Cup's got to be one you'd like to add next year.
Yeah, I'd love to add it, and I sat next to the winner this year, which obviously, I don't know. That's another match where I still don't quite. Obviously, it was a difficult day because of the weed came up in the week before, as you know, from virtually nowhere. But to me, it didn't change the result. The same peg still won. I don't know whether I could have won, but when you're next to the winner and get absolutely drubbed, you feel like could have done a little bit.
But again, at the same time, you couldn't probably ask for a better winner, could you?
No, exactly.
And the New Fish lads, the ethos they've had with the New Fish lads over the last couple of years has just been a really kind of and when we just spoke about the attitude, they would be a great example of doing it well. Yeah, they're so happy for each other.
Steve Fornell obviously won it, and he's a great and with the Graphite lads, they're a great example of maybe. And I don't think they'll mind me saying this, a team that 4 or 5 years ago were all right, but not quite there. But instead of saying, tell you what, lads, this is a bit, not enjoying this, these lads are mega, we're never going to catch them. They were like, I want a bit of that. You know what I mean? We're going to go out, we're going to work as a team, be close-knit, great camaraderie, and we're going to take them on. And as a result of which, not only have their individual results been transformed, but as a team, they've transformed it as well. And I think they're a great example of a team that haven't just quit when the going was tough, maybe at the start. They've been like, no, we can take these boys out. And on their day, they are taking us out.
Oh, they've put the right work in, so they've got that side. They tick the box that you said about hard work, but also the right attitude. They're happy for each other. They're smiling all the time. Steve is the best example. Look at the grin on his face.
He's such a happy guy. Such a happy bloke. Such a happy bloke.
Yeah, and it weren't just another, it weren't just another brown envelope. It weren't just, oh, no, nice one, chuck the envelope down, a bit of cash kind of thing. He was over the moon to win that trophy, and the whole team were over the moon for him. And even the rest of the anglers were so happy for him to win that, and for the New Fish guys to do so well. And it's great to see. And obviously, that's going to be one thing that you'd like to do next year. I know we spoke about it already, but before we move on to anything else,
I'd love to win that next year. But like, I think the beauty of Ferry Meadows is you never know what's going to happen. It could be my year.
No,
I always look at probably, and I don't think you'll mind me saying this. Obviously, on the subject of Ferry, the year before, Chris Hill was without doubt the most consistent angler on there. And his results were amazing. And this year didn't qualify for the final, which, if you'd have asked me that before the start, that was impossible for Chris.
Yeah,
not to qualify.
The year before, it was like everything.
He didn't fish badly,
but like the year before, everything he touched turned to gold, didn't it? Like he could not fish a bad match, and he, absolutely pinnacle. And the result showed it. He did really well. But this year, for whatever reason, he weren't the worst draw.
No, he didn't have maybe the rubber the green, but equally just didn't get going on. To his standards. Whereas the year before, like you say, even when you thought he hadn't drawn very well, he caught a load.
Yeah, you look at the results and you think, what the heck? How's he managed that one kind of thing? Yeah. But before we move on to perhaps what we might call the slightly more political or kind of talking about angling, for me, the UK Champs was a real standout one because it was that return to the commercial scene. And it was really 50-50, Steve, because half of the world said, like, you will never do it. Because you've been out of it for so long. But the other half of the world thought you never left it because, half of the industry thinks you are a commercial angler. And you probably still hear that all the time that, Steve Ringer's just a commercial carp angler.
I still get the Facebook trolls, obviously, you can only fish muddy holes. And it's like, that's why I spend all my time fishing massive natural waters. But no, you always get naysayers, but it's about, I didn't go into the UK Champs thinking I was definitely going to win. But no, it was another one.
You certainly showed them.
I'd had probably. I think I've had 3 seconds previous years, like going back when I used to target it, then maybe I had to step away to come back to win it. And for me, it was a little bit of a. There you go. I can still do it, and I knew I could still do it. But a lot of people are like, "Oh, he don't do it no more. Everyone's gone past him."
But it's just really interesting to see such a 50-50 split. Half the people thought you never left and just think you are a commercial angler. The other half said you'll never win it because you're not a commercial angler. But there's that old saying, obviously, that hard work beats talent. But if you've got both, you're unbeatable. If you put all the hard work and you've got the talent, it's nearly impossible to lose.
Yeah, and I think obviously, I worked hard at UKs. Obviously, had the rubber the green with the draw early in the rounds, and then tactically got it spot on. We had some good info, and obviously I can implement it. It goes back to what you think you said at the start. A good angler is a good angler, whatever he decides to do. All this myth about like so and so obviously fishes muddy puddles, put him on the wire, pop a river, he won't know what to do. He'd soon pick it up. Maybe 1-2 matches. Maybe he wouldn't be as good as Hadrian Whittle in 2-3 matches. I don't dispute that. But he'd be able to compete. And if he spent a whole winter on the Y, he'd be up there with everyone.
Yeah. So conscious that we can't go on for too long today, let's talk about fishing then. Obviously, I want to touch on the junior thing, which you said, and it goes all the way from the very basics of junior fishing to literally getting people into the sport, all the way to, like you said, the structure of getting people from 16 to 21 and into competitive fishing, international fishing. So just give us your snapshot view, because this is something we ask everyone, and obviously something we do really a lot of work with, not only with Guru but Canal and River Trust and things like that. What is your snapshot impression of participation? Getting kids into fishing at the moment.
I think you could say, if you look at obviously the Guru's talent pathway, that side of it, and then obviously what John Ellis is doing with obviously Canal and River Trust. There's more and more kids coming into fishing than there has been for many years. My concern is retention. Fishing's not cheap. I'm well aware of that. A lot of people, you get all your stuff for free, which is a load of, and I'm not going to swear, but that's a load of rubbish. Nothing's free in life. If anyone actually ever wants, we are going to cover it on a Guru podcast, but nothing's free. My concern is, I do believe things are better, as in we're bringing more kids in, but how do you retain them when the costs are high? You need parents. I was talking to Nick Marlowe at the Glebe a few months ago, and he believes we're maybe concentrating straight on the juniors isn't necessarily the right approach. We should be concentrating on like grandparents and stuff like that, who can then. I feel like kids, if they're going to stick at it, they either need an adult who's tremendously committed. If he doesn't fish, or she doesn't fish, and they don't know anything about it, or they need an adult that. In an ideal world, most of the people I know that fish, their dad fished.
Yeah. This is the problem, you say. Weirdly enough, no one in my family fished, but I've just got the bug. I just love.
That's the same as my dad. My dad started himself.
Yeah, I can't even think of a distant relation that fishes.
No, but back in that day and age, when my dad started, there wasn't much else to do.
No.
Now it's like you've got a million things to do. Like, you can
just fall into something that is easier to do. You can just fall into, whether it's a sport, you can fall into properly regulated football clubs, cricket clubs, all these kind of clubs, or you can fall into your Xbox or your PlayStation. You can fall into a million things that are easier to commit to than angling.
One of the problems is the cost of equipment. Like we do all these taste days. Kid comes down, catches his first fish, doesn't ever fish again. Because it's not easy. It's not like football where they take him to a football club. Kid kicks the ball around, and obviously his mum's like, "I'll tell you what, I'll get him a football and a pair of boots."
Yeah, done. You go to Tesco and there's a bin full of footballs in there for a fiver.
Obviously, he's great. He or she's caught their first fish. What do we do next? Well, we need a seat box, a net.
I'm doing it now, Steve. I'm doing it as we speak. With
exactly,
kids.
It's a massive outlay, and obviously, if the parents are a bit like, well, don't know whether they're really going to get into it.
So here's a great example of this for you, and it's not your kind of niche. It's more on the carp fishing side of things. And as you know, I worked in a tackle shop for several years, and I remember having this discussion with one of the reps, and I won't say which rep it was, but he said fishing's cheap as anything, cheap as chips, easier than ever kind of thing. And I was like, nonsense. And we're talking carp fishing, Steve, and as you well know, people see the magazines and they see, Pecky and Dovey and Spooner with these big 40-pounders, 50-pounders, all this kind of thing. And they go, I want to do that. And what they mean is they want to go camping in a bivvy with alarms and bed chair, all that kind of stuff. And if you want to go to somewhere like Bluebell, local to me, Bluebell was one of the probably most premier carp fisheries in the UK now. They want to go do that. And I said to this rep, I was like, look, I'll go through the catalogue. We'll get your catalogue. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through and we'll get the basic everything. Your bottom range, your entry-level stuff. 3 rods, 3 reels, 3 alarms, a bivvy, a stove, all this kind of stuff. You couldn't get fishing for less than $3,000.
No.
That was $3,000. And talking about the nature of, when we spoke about the well-drawn conversation, it's the same in specimen carp angling. Because if you turned up in that gear, people would take the piss out of you. Because you'd have the lowest, cheapest gear. You'd have the value range, essentially Tesco Savers bivvy, and it would take you $3,000 to do one night on the bank.
Yeah.
In what other sport, like you say, talking about going and get a football for a $5. In what other sport would you go home to your mum after a taster session and say, I really like this and I want to go catch them. Can I borrow $3,000 to find out if I want to stick to it?
No,
and it's not far off in match fishing, is it? When you probably need 200, 300, 400 quid a seat box.
Realistically, that's big carp fishing you're talking about to me, but you can't start match fishing either. The only way to start is perhaps what they're doing with Let's Fish, is a box and a box, a whip, and a net and a rig.
Yeah,
but then
let me just specify that John Ellis will go insane if we say it's a whip, because John's not a big fan of whip fishing, but short pole. He's fishing short pole. He's very much. Yeah, he's a bit anal about that one, is John, and he'll laugh about it. I think it's great. Do all mine. I start all my kids on whip fishing, to be fair. But like you say, Steve, even if you're talking about a box of any caliber, you're talking a couple of £100. Unless you've got a second-hand one, a real, beat-up second-hand box. Of a box of the entry-level box, you're talking a couple of £100. 50 quid for a decent whip or rod or waggler or feed, whichever one it is. You need a keep net, obviously, to go match fishing. You need some luggage to go match fishing. So you can easily anywhere from 500 to £1,000 just to fish your first match.
But
that's bottom basics.
I don't see an answer to that, I'll be honest. I just think, the only answer is to make fishing so appealing that obviously kids want to stick with it, and gradually they build their kit up. But let's be honest.
I mean,
fishing isn't cool. Fishing isn't cool. That's the honest.
No.
There's a lot cooler things to do than fishing, I'm afraid.
Has it ever been, Steve? I mean, it's less popular than it used to be. But even when it was more popular, was it cool? I don't know. Like,
No, it was never
sometimes
cool. It was
I think
never cool. But the less people that fit, it's a bit like you know that conversation with some 15-year-olds on the playground. What are you doing this weekend? I'm going fishing.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
really?
It's not
But
normal.
then I will
It's
say, a
it's
lot
not
of my
normal anymore, is it?
no, a lot of my lads mates, they do a little bit. They're not what I'd call fishermen, but they all do a little
Yeah.
bit. You know what I mean? They'll go like,
Yeah.
it's socially, it's more than socially acceptable. But I just think it's really difficult. You know what I mean? I'm not criticising taster days, etc., anything like that. But I think it's great to say.
The real question is, can we do any more? Like, you cannot. I'll never criticise someone for doing a taster session with a whip. Catch your first rud on a maggot kind of thing. Cannot be a bad thing. But hitting the nail on the head, and everyone answers the question the same way, and I agree as well. It's the transition, because we can do that, and they'll have a lovely day. And if you do nothing else, they'll never come back. That'll be their only experience.
To me, I see these stats at the end of every year. We've introduced, 10,000 kids to fishing. I've put that figure out the sky. I don't know how many it is. The key word there is introduced. How many of you How many are going to be retained?
Yeah, it should be retained.
That's the stat I'd love to see. Introduce 10,000, and if you retain 2,000, I think that'd be an absolute miracle.
Well, yeah. So do you think there's anything we can actually do to do that, though, Steve? Do you think there's a structure or a grassroots system or any kind of funnel you can put them in? And bearing in mind, I agree with you, you'll age out some of them just due to life. They're going to get their first job, get their first partner, they're going to have kids maybe at that age, even, upper teens.
Yeah.
They're going to get interested in other things. Is there anything we can do from a structural point of view to improve retention to full adult anglers?
Honestly, I don't. If there is, I'll be honest, I don't know of it. You know what I mean? And people will say, well, it's all right him standing there criticising.
Yeah.
But, it's not an easy solve. You know what I mean?
Well, bearing in mind, I actively do it, Steve. I run a coaching group. I train coaches, all these kind of things. So, I get what you say about it's all right for you to say it because it's not really your day job, so to speak. I actively do it, and I don't think there's much we can really do.
I'm not criticising the people that do it at all, because it's better to do that than do nothing.
You can't, like I say, you can't call it a bad thing. Just because we introduced 10,000 and they churned, so to speak, that doesn't mean you shouldn't introduce 10,000, because some of them will just organically love it, won't they? You see that kid, as you like you said, you used to do a bit of fishing, and you'll see the one. And I've got a couple right now that I can picture in my gang of kids that we're coaching, and you just think you're going to be an angler, and you're going to go out and read every magazine, and you're going to look at every website, watch all the YouTube videos, and in a year's time, with or without us, you're going to fish.
Yeah.
But then I think there's only so much we can do.
I do think if you wanted like a completely new angle, what Nick Marlowe said isn't a bad shout. It would be to try and target some adults.
I've heard the same, Steve. It's that COVID thing. We brought all these anglers back during COVID.
Yes.
That massive spike because it's the only thing anyone could do. And they all went again. If you look at the rod license stats, we went like down, 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 COVID, down, 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 down on the same curve. We've essentially got a little blip in the same curve where it went like that. And then, and it's just maths, Steve. If you've got less adults, you will have less kids. What do we do to make more adults fish? Do we make it more appealing? Is it a marketing thing? Is it an angling trust thing? Is it an environment agency thing?
You'd have to run some sort of, whether it's run through, some sort of used to fish as a kid, get back into fishing days.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think from your, bringing it back to you, because it's not your job to solve angling, but you are at the pinnacle of match angling, certainly in the world, for a very long time. Again, I'll come back to cricket because it's kind of high on the agenda at the moment. T20 re-injected a lot into cricket, revenue-wise and kind of eyes on it wise. Is there a T20 of fishing? Is there a T20 of fishing there? Because the old test match scene died out. But, is there an exciting new thing to do in fishing that's going to make everyone go do it?
No. That's the short and sweet.
Yeah, because fishing will just be fishing.
Fishing is fishing, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't work in a 30-minute format. It's not exciting enough, you know what I mean? Like, I think Fishermania works on TV amazingly, but it's a massively expensive broadcast. But it works because of like the half-hourly weigh-in, building the excitement to crescendo. Like I know loads of people who don't fish who love watching Fishermania, but
it kind of works because I'm not being funny, but the broadcast is nothing like a normal match.
no, exactly. That's why it works.
We've manufactured something for that show. Essentially, we've made a show out of Fisho.
You couldn't, to me, put on telly, don't know, Steve Ringer versus Jamie Hughes, 2 pegs, 30-minute mashup. You know what I mean? No one's going to want to watch that. It's boring as hell.
Yeah. And
well, if you fish, you will, but it's not going to increase participation. Which is
in which case it defeats the purpose because the only people that watch it are already doing it.
To a degree, fishing is fishing. As in, we do what we do, but there's no doubt we need more. We need more youngsters. We need more adults. We need more fishermen. I honestly believe, without being a Debbie Downer, that match fishing in 25 years will be in a really bad way. In the UK, really bad way. I don't even know what will be left. I'd love to do a survey, and maybe it's something we could do of the average age of get from a few different big open match fisheries and find out what the average age is.
Well, bearing in mind, if you look at the platforms now, Steve, and obviously you're on the Clubmate podcast, software like ours that you can book matches through gives you that data. Yeah. Obviously you can, rather than selling bits of paper or joining a match with comments on Facebook, when you're selling tickets through digital platforms, you can data collect those kind of things. And that's the kind of interesting data you can get, which is average ages, the gender of people fishing, the age groups, the categories, the days, the most popular times. So I think we're getting those tools and, years to come, let's see what we can do with it. So moving it further than kids, because I think the conclusion here is, we're doing what we can do. There's probably not much more, but keep doing what you're doing anyway, because it's not a bad thing.
And obviously, maybe something will just come along and it'll be like, I don't believe there is a eureka answer.
I agree. I completely agree.
It's a case of doing as much as we can, and maybe fishing will suddenly catch a wave. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't sound very inspirational, but I think that's as good as it gets.
The truth is the truth, Steve. But so kind of coming towards the end of today's podcast, wider angling then. So where do you see fishing at the moment in terms of the sport, and not just maybe your side of things, match angling specifically? Do you think the sport's in a good place, and whether that's just the kind of domestic scene or the international scene or pleasure fishing or business? Obviously, working for Tackle Guru, I think it's hard to say that Tackle Guru's in a bad place. I don't think you can say Tackle Guru's in decline.
Okay. My attitude is the companies, the shops that are proactive and thinking outside the box, obviously good marketing, etc. They're the ones doing well. If the people that maybe are still doing the same thing as they did 25 years ago, I don't imagine life's great for them. But it's the same as anything in life that you have to keep evolving. You know what I mean? Even as an angler, you have to evolve to stay up, and I think that's where we're at. I'd say the trade. I don't think match fishing's in an amazing place in the UK, but I'd argue in Europe it is in an amazing place. And for companies like Guru, who I work for, Europe's as important as UK. So there's a lot of growth. In Europe.
Same with most things. Some of the UK anglers have missed this because of the tunnel vision of their own fishing. They don't realise that the market for people like Guru and Matrix and all these kind of things is in Europe. A lot of the market is growing in Europe, and you're not going to focus on a declining market when you've got a massive incline in Europe, and it's a much broader picture than I think what a lot of UK anglers see.
I don't think fishing's in a bad place in the UK currently. Yes, we could do with more kids coming through, but yes, we could do with more. You could always say we need more anglers, because how could more anglers ever be a bad thing? But
obviously, we'd also like more money. The important part of that is money, and it's not just not for profit, not to pay people, but to invest in the sport. Some of the challenges. We used the ugly black word earlier about the Black Death. The cormorants. Yeah. We spoke about cormorants earlier. One of the biggest or easiest solutions to that is more investment in habitat. And for that, you need money. And for that, you need anglers to pay you, So more anglers are essential. And I think one of the most worrying things for me, Steve, people always want to talk about the obvious stuff, don't they? Otters, cormorants, kids fishing, things like that. And they're all very valid. And I think sometimes volume makes things valid. Regardless of whether you agree with it, if everyone in the sport is complaining about cormorants, then cormorants are the problem.
Yeah.
Pollution, obviously. Pollution is on everyone's lips. But I think one of the, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, because for those of us like me, yourself and me, we're paid to fish essentially, and I don't mean paid to go fishing, but we're paid in the sport of angling, and we pay our bills with angling essentially. Look at things like, and I don't know if you've seen this, but the Winger with Lido. Have you seen that situation with the Winger with Lido?
Yeah.
Probably one of the biggest challenges in the world is that angling will get shut down because no one thinks it's important. Places like Winger with Lido are a really important case, not only for the local anglers, but nationally. We can't set a precedent where the wider community have decided that angling is a negative to biodiversity.
The problem is with Winger, with that, I can't remember the name of the Lido, let's call it.
Yeah.
Joe Bloggs, who lives 100 mile away, doesn't care because it don't affect him. And that's sad.
Which we touched on.
But that's true.
Yeah, and this is the problem.
Going back to what you just said about the black death, the cormorants, I remember when cormorants were hammering, like, obviously some good natural match fisheries, talking to some carpers, and they were like, cormorants, best thing that's ever happened. Thinning out the silverfish, the carp are getting bigger. And yet, then the otter...
So short-sighted.
Yeah, the otter appears. And all of a sudden, the carp anglers are like, oh, you match anglers are going to back us. We need to get rid of these otters. Yeah. They're eating our prize carp, and that's the fragment. Yeah. That's how fragmented the sport is. No one cares about anyone else. Sadly,
I think this is the biggest problem in angling, Steve. More than any of the individual ones, is the fact that angling can't even unite. And I've said this, and I know it's a gross oversimplification, but if you go to Downing Street, if you go to the government and campaign for whatever X in angling, X, Y, Z. If I was there, if I was in power and in authority, the first thing I would say, Steve, is you lot can't even agree with each other. Like, what do you want us to do when you lot can't even agree with each other? The zander being a great example. Half of the sport wants to kill every zander, and the other half want to catch it. So if you're natural England, you look at that and say, well, which is it you want, fishermen? Anglers. Which is it you want with that one? And the Winger with Lido is probably the best example of that. Everyone should care about Winger with Lido because they need to be a little less short-sighted and think that could be my venue next.
Yes.
When Ferry Meadows, and I'm not saying that Neen Park will do this, but if Ferry Meadows decides we don't like fishing anymore, we will lose a national monument of angling. That's a pinnacle, pinnacle venue in the UK. And every angler in the UK should sign a petition to say, no, we shouldn't lose fishing on the Winger with Lido. And it's not fishing on the Winger with Lido, it's the fact that the decision is that they want to create a biodiversity hub, and they've decided that angling is a negative impact on that, which is actually counter to the truth. And as you know, Steve, angling probably invests more into habitat projects, new access, new plants, new trees, new fish, new everything than any other aspect of society, more than the boaters, more than the dog walkers, the cyclists, everything else. So we can't allow that narrative to propagate because it's simply not true. And if we allow it to, that's going to grow into this big thing where, and obviously the modern rewilding, rewilding's a popular term these days. If everyone associates rewilding and this kind of social responsibility to develop venues with not fishing, if we allow that to perpetuate, that's going to be very bad for us.
Yes.
And to people like me and you, very, very bad, Steve, because we'll end up not having a job.
But people
perhaps not in our life, but
people don't see the bigger picture of fishing is fishing. So, the Lido, for instance, that could be the beginning. You allow that to happen. Yeah, that's exactly
the problem.
The next thing Northamptonshire Council, Peterborough Council, or whoever, they look and think, we've got a really nice lake there. We could do a biodiversity hub. Let's get rid of anglers. They've done it.
Yeah, and that's why that Winger with Lido is such an important kind of topic. There's that phrase, the line must be drawn here. If we don't stop it here, that's going to be probably the biggest problem in angling because, we can talk about otters and cormorants all we want. If you ain't allowed to go fishing, it don't really matter, does it, Steve?
No.
You ain't going to be worried about how many fish there are.
Otters and cormorants have been the same. There's been no, otters, unrealistic. Nothing's ever going to happen about otters. That's fact of life.
And they are a native species, they are a native UK species.
To 99% of the population, they're a lovely cuddly animal that they see at the zoo.
Yeah.
So
and they also, Steve, from a technical point of view, they do find a symbiosis with the environment. You might get this short-term boom in population, but they will predate on each other. They will force each other out of the territory, and you will get a balance with the environment. The cormorant is a completely different thing, as you know.
To me, the cormorant is the massive issue because the numbers are growing and they're going to continue to grow. And
they don't harmonise. They will literally deteriorate a venue.
I know some people say there's nothing good about an otter, but there really is nothing good about a cormorant. Nothing.
No, it is a sheer migratory invasive bird, and it's not technically invasive. I can't call it technically an invasive non-native species, but it will predate to the level that a venue is empty and then move on. Whereas an otter will find a balance because they're biologically smarter in that they'll find this kind of level where they can all thrive.
Yeah,
and no, that doesn't work on the individual basis if it eats Dave the carp. Anglers are bothered about the one with a name. So if it eats Big Billy, yes, that's not very nice. But in terms of fish, it will reach a balance where it's okay, kind of thing. Whereas the cormorant will keep increasing in number until it literally devastates and empties the venue and then just move to the next one.
Yeah.
And obviously, small fish are small fish, Steve. So whether they're small fish that are always small fish like bleak, or whether it's a small carp or a small bream or a small tench, they'll wipe out the whole year group. So the important thing, and we'll come to a close in a minute, the important thing for angling is that we unite on all issues and that we understand all issues. And a lot's got to be said for the governing body there, Steve, I think. I think we've got to say a lot for the governing body, that they've got to find a way. And this isn't a jab at all, because I know how difficult that is, and so do you, to engage anglers. But it's someone's job. Someone's got to take the bull by the horns there and engage the angling audience to join together and explain to them that just because it's over there doesn't mean it doesn't affect you and it's not important.
No, and also make people understand that we're stronger together.
Absolutely, 100%. You can see that.
Carp anglers versus match anglers is an age old, you know what I mean? And even in match fishing, river anglers versus commercial anglers.
Oh yeah, like you say, Hadrian Whittle versus yourself,
exactly.
kind of thing.
You know what I mean? If
we're back against it. Real fishing. That's real fishing.
I don't know whether it can be achieved, but obviously, if everyone stood together, we'd actually be quite a powerful alliance.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got 1 million people. We've got 1 million anglers, and a million people is 1 million people. That's always going to be a big number. Anyone that says they don't want 1 million is probably doing something wrong. But that's probably a good place to finish on, and we'll round out from there. So to sum up, another fantastic year for Steve Ringer fishing, for Steve Ringer as an angler. As you said, you didn't feel great at the start, but, talent has brought you through to another 2 tick boxes in the arsenal.
Bit of luck along the way.
Yeah, a bit of luck along the way. 2026, ambitious as ever. Most people that win everything, that you then say, well, if I've won so many things, I won't want to do anything else. But when they finally win it, they just find the next thing to win. And I'm sure that's exactly what you're going to do.
Even just being consistent is, consistency. I know
consistency is its own victory.
You've done it for years, consistent, but you still want to stay consistent for as long as you can. You know what I mean? Stay being regarded as one of the top names, and hopefully pushing the sport on.
Yeah. We've discussed some of the challenges with the sport and what we think about the future. I'm going to close out, Steve, by asking you one more time, one thing next year then. So what is the number one, if you had to pick one, what is the one thing you want next year?
I'd like another world gold, you know what I mean? Obviously, you can never set out as an individual, but like if you get a team gold, then you've got a good chance of an individual gold. The problem is, you can't set out, to me, to be individual world champion and win as a team, and the team always comes first. Yeah. So, you know what I mean? Like, I'll be honest, I'd like to retain feeder masters. That would be amazing. But that's not priority. Don't we? If I qualify, which hopefully I will, and I win it, then brilliant. But like, if someone said to me, "What do you want to do next year?" I want another gold. That's my mate. There isn't anything left in the UK at the minute that. Don't get me wrong, I love feeder masters, but there isn't, and I love the Super League. It'd be nice to win that with the team, but for me, it's about the world stage. So another gold would be amazing, and also it'd show as a team. Like obviously, we had an amazing year, European Feeder Cup, World Champions. if we won again next year, it's like you're sending a real message, like England are back.
Yeah, it's a proper kind of. It starts to become a legacy then, rather than
Yes.
a good year, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So fingers crossed. I've got no doubt at all that you'll do it, or certainly that you'll make the best effort at it. So best of luck, Steve.
Cheers,
thank you very much for joining us. We'll round out for today, guys. Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Casting Forward podcast, and join us next time when I'm sure we'll have another fantastic guest. Thanks very much, and speak to you later.
Thanks for listening. Join us next time for another episode of the Casting Forward podcast, brought to you by Clubmate. And if you haven't already, click the subscribe button now and follow us for more.